Hi, I am Júlia da Silveira Moreira, and I am with Camilo Pérez Bustillo. We are glad to participate in the 19th Congress of the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, the IADL, in the city of Kathmandu in Nepal. And we are here to present a panel about against fascism and imperialism, Latin American legal resistance from below. And then I pass the word to my colleague Camilo to start with our presentation.
Uh, Warm greetings of solidarity. We're honored to participate. We represent the International Tribunal of Conscience of Peoples in Movement, which is based in Mexico City, was founded here in November of 2010. I'm physically located right now in Mexico City, but most of my work recently has been in the US. Our presentation tries to reflect the collective reflections and work of the tribunal and how we are trying to engage with the impact of the Trump policies, specifically regarding migration. Much of our work in the tribunal has been grounded in the resistance of the sector that we describe as peoples in movement, pueblos en movimiento, which we define as the collective subjects of transnational rights, the groups that are normally referred to in hegemonic discourse within human rights and international law as migrants, refugees, and the displaced. It's evident that the ideological foundations of Trump, of what we can identify as the neo-fascism associated with Trump, not just within the US, but regionally and globally, is centered around the persecution, targeting, and terror of policies against those who are identified as migrants and migrant communities and their families. This includes the policies of mass detention and mass deportation, and these cannot be confined to the physical boundaries or territory of the US. What we would argue is that all of the debates about whether or not we should speak about fascism or about the US entering a constitutional crisis or a crisis of rule of law is a much more academic discussion. In practice, there is a state of exception, a state of emergency that is experienced by migrant families and communities on the ground today in contexts like Los Angeles, LA, where federal troops have been mobilized, both National Guard and Marines. In Latin America, we're accustomed to headlines that say the Marines invade Nicaragua or the Marines invade Panama or threaten to invade Cuba or whatever example we want to think of, Venezuela. But today the headline is the Marines invade LA. And so on the streets of LA, just in the last few days, in places like MacArthur Park. We've seen armored personnel carriers, tanks, the most heavily armed units of the US armed forces deployed against the people of Los Angeles, but specifically against migrant families and communities in complicity with, in coordination with state police, highway patrol, the city police of Los Angeles, the county police, but most specifically with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and with the Border Patrol. So, in effect, we have the militarization of public security, which is characteristic of fascism or neo fascism, but which we have also seen throughout Latin America, throughout the period of the imposition of the doctrine of national security as an exercise of US foreign policy and US hegemony. And so this is nothing new for us from a Latin American perspective. And so we think that there's a lot to learn from when we talk about emerging patterns of both neo-fascist domination. We have to talk about emerging processes of resistance and also of all the ways that these forms of resistance, which are emerging on the streets of LA and Chicago and New York and throughout the country and at the border, are processes of learning from similar modes of resistance in Latin America and around the world. Today in the US, we speak about some of the specific aspects and dimensions of human rights that previously were only discussed in the US when we were speaking about violations elsewhere in the world, for example, in Latin America. So when we speak about scientific juridical concepts, such as the conceptualization of crimes against humanity, such as forced disappearances or torture, which of course are recognized by the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court in those terms as international crimes, we now speak about those being committed on US territory against migrants, and we speak about migrants being forcibly disappeared and subjected to conditions equivalent to torture when they are put on these deportation flights, which have created diplomatic conflicts with states like Colombia and Brazil and like Honduras, where there have been disputes about whether or not to receive those flights, including military flights. And so there's a lot to discuss there about emerging modes of resistance, not just within the US, but in Latin America. And so what is emerging, when we had the period of the Cold War, it was often discussed that there was a Gulag archipelago in the Soviet Union of prison camps and detention centers within the territory of the Soviet Union. Now we have a Trumpian archipelago where we have not just the flights to El Salvador, to this notorious prison called Secot, through this bilateral agreement with the Bukele regime, but we also have the revival of Guantanamo, which of course is occupied, illegally occupied Cuban sovereign territory, where we have 72 detainees from more than 40 countries, including Brazil and Mexico and Colombia. And we also have this recent flight that sent third country migrants to South Sudan after they were held in Djibouti, that included nationals from Cuba, from Vietnam, from Laos, and from Mexico. In addition to that, we have the US as part of this Trumpian archipelago. right? The equivalent of the Gulag now. We have the Trump administration seeking agreements with 57 countries around the world in this process of what we have defined through the collective work of the tribunal and the work of migration scholars throughout the world of externalization and extraterritorial imposition of the Trump policies and their regionalization and globalization throughout the world. So,
Yes.
whatever is developed in terms of terror and repression needs to be resisted continentally, regionally, and globally. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you, Camilo, and taking forward your word. We need to protest fascism, on imperialism, as we see every day what has happened in Palestine, in the all the region there, Arabic region, and it's very serious how imperialism is causing suffering, and Zionism is causing suffering in all over the world, and the maintaining of these wars like in Ukraine, also giving like these big powers. And sometimes they ally themselves to continue these wars. And we see now in Latin America, especially the issue of the trade and commercial wars, which launched Trump. And is not about trade and commerce. This is about uh, politics, and this is about imposing imperialism over the countries because we are watching this now widespread in the news about Brazil. And this is regard not only about a problem of companies and presidents, but it's about a strategy uh, to frame, to overpass sovereignty of the countries and to impose what is the imperialists want. You see how Trump said explicitly that they wanted a regime change in Iran. This has happened when U.S. banked the dictatorships in Latin America, or how they made in Haiti, and other countries, how they think that they have the power to change governments that is not allied from them. And this is how they make now like a supporting a criminal family and group in Brazil, which is the Bolsonaro family, who is implicated in a very huge process of coup d'etat, I think, to against the democracy and the institutions in Brazil. And this is very serious about how U.S. government allied to Israel government, which is making the biggest genocide in the world we have seen recently, and how they now try to impose their wish to Brazil. And you see how they are speaking about this issue of rare earth minerals in China and Ukraine. And of course, Brazil is a very big land of rare earth minerals. And we know what they want. And they want the richness of the people, the wealth of the peoples. And of course, we need to resist against this. So the question is about how we can connect the resistance, how we can connect the resistance internally with, because we also have human rights violations inside Brazil. We also have violations committed by the Brazilian state, but the point is how now the state and government is capable to express the wish of the people and the sovereignty to confront this national aggression against the countries. So I think this will have another phase in other countries like Colombia, Mexico, and Peru, and this is very important to talk about.
I think something that we can add to this, I should have mentioned before. I mean, just like there's a question about how much Brazil can resist or Colombia can resist some of the more progressive regimes in Latin America, there's a big question for Mexico, of course, because Mexico is at the front line of potential impact and damage from the US, but also of potential resistance. And right now, sadly, Mexico is collaborating and cooperating in many ways with the US in terms of security because of the drug war issue, of course, but also because of migration policy. And many of us say, many of us who are migration advocates in the US and Mexico say that now Mexico is the wall. And it is Mexico that is the biggest ally, sadly, with the US and the biggest obstacle for migrants. And as long as Mexico collaborates with the US, migrants will have a big um, a big wall that they will have to transcend. No?
So we give a very big greeting to the public of the IADL conference, and we wish also to develop the advocacy and the lobbying for the people all over the world, and to support the Day of Endangered Lawyers and other initiatives from IADL. So I think this panel is also a way for us to get connected our campaigns, our topics from Latin America and from other parts to IADL. So we send a very big greeting for you. Have a very good Congress, and maybe we can keep in touch, keep in contact. Goodbye.
Thank you all.